Well, what is your investment advisor really trying to tell you? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Listen, if you got a question for me, I want to invite you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Once you get to the website, there's a link at the top of the page. All you have to do is click through that link, ask your question, and I'll get you an answer. Really, it is that simple. A lot more simple than getting a peace deal with Iran. So if you got a question, just go to, once again, prudentmoney.com. We'll get you taken care of. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I just kind of breaking this down before I got on the radio, is communication. Because I think everything I'm going to talk to today, the success or the failure of whatever the idea is, comes down to effective communication. And I break it down this way. You have communication. If that is done correctly, to where both parties understand and are both on the same page, then they can leave the negotiation table or wherever they came to that spot, and they have an understanding of what the rest of the journey looks like. They have an understanding of decisions they're going to make. With that understanding, they can make effective, prudent decisions, therefore helping them further along to reach to stay within their values and reach their goals. And I think a lot of this, I bring this up because I think a lot of it has to come down to effective communication in advisor-client relationships. What does the advisor mean when he or she says this? Or how could, and I think that the responsibility comes back on the advisor, that the advisor really needs to make sure that what I said to you is clearly communicated, and I can tell when that's not the case, or I can tell when there's some confusion. I stop to make sure that there isn't any confusion. I make sure that whoever I'm talking to understands that there probably will be confusion, and it's okay. Let's take our time because this is really important. I don't think a whole lot of that's going on in these meetings. Today, advisors have to be effective communicators, especially today because of everything that's going on. Take, for instance, a good question to start off with is, why is the market not just tanking? You've got everything that's not going right, and yet the market, takes a little bit, declines a little bit, comes back up, declines a little bit more, it comes back way up. It's just, it's like you can't knock it down. There's nothing that is strong enough to bring the market down to where professional traders who lead the way say, if I'm out, I'm getting out of here, and we'll come back later when it looks a little more stable. But you're just not seeing that. And it really comes down to this. There's a lot of belief that President Trump is going to get a peace deal. I am personally not one of those people, and I'm not. And let me preface that by saying that's not an anti-Trump thing. That's not. I think he's doing as good a job as he can do in a very difficult situation. At the same time, I think it's very unrealistic. Of course, he's not going to say this. It's unrealistic to think that a peace deal's in the bag. I mean, you've got a country with 47 years of hatred, saying death to the U.S. and instilled in the population, and I don't see that group of people in Iran coming forward and saying, forget about it. Hey, forget about the past 47 years, even though that's all I heard growing up. Forget about the past 47 years when that's really what some of my values are built on. Hatred of another country or hatred of what it stands for, whatever that is. It's not like that's just going to go away. And I want you to hear me, because the other thing I don't want you to do, and I may be completely wrong, I don't think this is even remotely over with. And when it does, sure, that will be a great time to invest. I say this because I would just be careful in what you do today if you're planning on making any moves. Being very careful on the decisions that you make and making sure that you've done your homework, that you've really prayed about it, and you're at a level of peace about the next move that you're going to make. Because the only reason I think the market's up is, first of all, some of this faith in what President Trump's going to do is stirred up by the media, because the media doesn't really have any clue as to why it's going up either. But I think you look at the fact that he's bringing in the warships, which once again I think that all it is a recipe for disaster. High risk. We've talked about this before. If you go back and you read any of President Trump's books he's written, he is a home run hitter. He gets up to the plate. He doesn't look to hit singles. He doesn't look to hit doubles or triples. He wants them home runs. You strike out a lot when you do that. But when you hit the home run, that's big reward. And he's good at it. And I think he expects it to happen every time. I just don't think that in this particular time we're up against a situation where that's going to be feasible. And it's a lot of moving parts, very, very, very complicated. So just keep that in mind as you make decisions, and don't forget how complex this is and what's happening, and the fact that there's a lot of other issues to fold into the situation. The players like China, what's going on with Lebanon. I mean, there's just so many different factors that what the media tends to do is to take it and break it down and make it look a lot less risky than it really is. Okay, I've said my piece. And, personally would love to see it being over with an hour ago. What I feel and just so that you know, I'm not picking sides if you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, whatever. I just know there's some strong, strong feelings. All I want to do is give you the other side of the story, whether you like it or not, because I think that you've got to make sure that what you believe is congruent with what God wants for you. And taking that a step further, it's hard to get there if you really don't have that peace. So you can't get that peace unless you know both sides of the story. This isn't a game of belief renting, where when I mean by belief renting, I mean that I say XYZ is a great company, and I tell you a little bit about XYZ, what they're doing. They're an A1 artificial intelligence company. They do this, they do that. Someone comes up to you later and you go, well, hey, have you heard any great stocks? Yeah, this XYZ stock. Let me tell you about it. This individual has probably no idea why that's a great stock. Probably not, because he or she, they're just regurgitating what I'm saying, and they're relying on my beliefs. They're renting them. You need to own your beliefs when it comes to money. And I will say this, the only way you can make effective decisions. So let's back to this question. My advisor is, there's a client here going to talk to their advisor and wants some reassurance, wants to get his or her take on what's happening. Is this a long-term thing? Is this a short-term thing? Are we taking too much risk? And that's it's interesting, based on what the advisor said to the client, would indicate to me anyway, is that we're not clicking. We're not on the same page as far as risk goes. And that's a problem. I think the top 5, maybe even top 3 of the most important things that you can establish is that this is my risk level. This is what's appropriate for me. This is what's not appropriate for me. And I understand the pros and the cons of being at this risk level and what that means. And that could mean, Bob, I don't think what you're saying is completely wrong. I just don't agree with it. I feel like I should be invested in an S&P 500 fund, and that's at low cost, and I'm going to allow that to be invested for 15, 20, 25 years. Nothing wrong with that. So my kids tell me. Yeah, can you believe that? even though I don't quite agree with some aspects of it, but it's all my opinion. You got your opinion, I got my opinion. That doesn't make either one of us right or wrong. Only time says, yeah, that was the right strategy to go for, but you don't have the luxury of getting that before you say anything, before you get there. So make sure that you've got the right risk level. And this also comes back to communication, is that, I've been an advisor for, I think, 32 years, and I've heard this risk conversation so many times where the advisor says, what do you think your risk level is? Between highest risk of 10, 1 is the lowest risk. And the client says to the advisor, I think I'm a 5, or I think I'm a 4, I think I'm a 6. And so real quick mental gymnastics going on in the advisor's head, says, oh, you're a 6. I would have said you're a 7, but I could see you being a 6. That's great. Well, so we'll invest into something that reflects that of a 6 risk level. And the advisor's going, oh, great. Well, he or she understands me. And the whole time, if you really looked at what his or her, the advisor, what their risk level really meant, I don't know that you would say that you were a 6. But you see, it's a short, quick conversation, unfortunately. And it starts and ends in one sentence. I mean, you should spend a long time discussing the various situations scenarios that could happen, and all the things that you need to be aware of before you get to the right risk scale. Once you get to the right risk level, I think you're in good shape. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am up against a break. Stick around. We're just getting started. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you got a question for me, please go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Look for that link at the top of the page and just ask your question, and we'll get you taken care of. It's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Let's talk a little bit more about risk, because I think this is worth parking on this subject for a bit and really getting down into some details. I have never, you'll get this a lot from your advisor, that you're a long-term investor. If you look at the charts, the market always goes up. And I have never considered using the strategy, if you want to call it that, or the belief that being a long-term investor always works. And real quick, and if an advisor was sitting there, probably say, "Oh, I didn't say it always works." But you're saying that gives you the best odds, because the problem is, I'll use my I'll use my son as a good example. Boy, in fact, I can safely do that because he doesn't listen to my program. In fact, none of my family does. I don't get it. So in conversation with my son, he says, well, I'm going to put money into an S&P 500 index fund. And I'm just going to let it grow. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to invest in the stock market. So I gave him my speech about it. It fell on deaf ears, of course. And so, which is fine. You know, everybody's got their own strategy they want to follow sometimes. And that's why I have a job that people that don't have an idea what they want to do. So there is, a period of time here where he will either be successful or not successful. But even if he's not successful, like most people in his population group, age group, they will consider it the long term. Just it'll be okay. Yeah, I lost 30%, but I'll get it back in the long term, and the long term will prove him right. And then it will continue to go down, go back up, because the market doesn't go up or fall in a straight line. And he'll live a life going through bear market cycles where he'll lose a lot of money, he'll get it back, and the ultimate belief that he will be forming and shaping the habit is that as long as I stay invested for the long term, I am in good shape. And he may be. It's a matter of odds and probabilities as to whether or not the market's going to follow your way or whether or not your investments are going to be right. There's a lot that has to follow your way to make, and it's just the market makes it look so tempting, so easy. And there's a lot more to it than you know this. So by the time he gets to 60, he is banking it, sitting on a large sum of money. He's been disciplined. He's been in continued to invest, very consistent, intentional about it. And he says, I'm age 60, I'm going to retire. And the minute he retires, a bear market hits. And in bear markets, you could lose 55, 60%, 50%, 45% over a longer period of time. It's brutal. It's been a while since we've had one. The last one, of course, was in 2008, 2007 and 2009 to be exact. It was brutal. And if you weren't prepared for it, it was really brutal. And people lost a lot of money. And so he'll ride that down, maybe gets a job, and gets out of retirement because he's still only 60. And then he decides to get out again and be retired. Doesn't change anything because he knows he's developed the belief he'll be okay because the market always comes back. Because that's what he has seen. That's all he knows, right? You know people like this. This is what their belief system is. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's wrong or it's right. It's just what it is. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I would suggest to put another aspect of investing in there, which we'll talk about. But things have to work out perfectly, I think, so much more for that to work than what I'll talk about. So he gets back into the market. The market is, let's say it's 2007. And he goes through and loses 55%. And this time is the real deal. He's now 68, and he's got to go back to work because he took what was a big amount of money and sliced it in half. It's gone for the short term anyway. And he could have prevented that. And I know that's big and bold for me to say. There maybe not prevented it, but there are ways to change the complete look of that outcome and things that you can do. I mean, I remember the stories of investors back in 2008 who decided to get out right at the top of the market, 2000. I can remember this story. I can remember the pictures of the guy fishing. He's retired. He was happy. And then that bear market that nobody saw coming because we hadn't seen one since the 60s and 70s, minus a crash in 1987, which was brutal. But most people would say, "Hey, I can ride this out. It'll drop. It'll come back." And the problem is that if you hold your money through a bear market and you take money out, you even do more damage. And so I know a lot of people who had to go back to work. I know a lot of people who chose to not change their risk levels on their 529 plans. And their kids were going to school, starting college. That one probably broke my heart the most as I listened to stories from people, from listeners and people that I met, that they were in a situation where they worked so hard to build up that 529 plan. It's the plan that you build up investments in strictly for college. And to see those plans just get annihilated. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough to watch. So, here we are in a scenario where the thought process is that Trump will save the day. And he may be paying these guys off in the background and we would never know it. Or he may be that skilled of a negotiator. We'll see. I would only submit to you that it is important to look at this from a probability standpoint. What's the probability that he makes all this go away? What's the probability that this intensifies and gets worse? And I understand the whole aspect of being positive and being negative. I got that. I'm not trying to be negative. I just think that there are quite a few problems, to say it lightly, in this situation. And I would just suggest that if you have a tendency to move more to the less risk side, not telling you to do that, I'm just saying it makes more sense. In other terms, would mean that plan A versus plan B. Plan A when the market goes up, plan B when the risk gets heavy, and you have to do something different. Something that will help you get through and get back on the right course. And that's what I would love to spend the next hour actually talking to you about, but I can't because I'm about done. And we do have tomorrow, hopefully, right? And we'll talk tomorrow about the plan A versus the plan B. Why it makes no sense to use one plan for the rest of for your entire investment life, because the market doesn't go up without problems. And it's those times where the problems pop up that you need to have a strategy that says, you know what, I don't know if it's the best time or not the best time to take risks, to not take risks. This is where I feel led to go. This is what how I feel led to be invested. And that's what I'm going to do until the foreseeable future. And then I will look at it again and I will make changes. If you can get on that level with your financial advisor, I think that's invaluable. Unfortunately, most financial advisors aren't on that same page, and which is fine. It's just what works best for you, because at the end of the day, you call your shots, you make your decisions. Hopefully, you make them in light of God's sense of peace that He has blessed you with, or maybe not blessed you with, and you're kind of going on your own here. The most important thing, though, is that you have two strategies, because the market doesn't always go up and stay up. in the times you need it to stay up. I think people can handle the fact that it goes up and goes down. I think the problem is that if you get the timing right, it's great. But if you get that timing wrong, and when I'm talking about shifting risk levels, once again, which we'll talk about more of that tomorrow, and really get into what that means. But I hope this is giving you a few things to think about. If you have a question for me, go to prudentmoney.com. Go up to the top of the page, hit the link, and send me that question. I'd love to hear from you. I do read all these emails, and if I can help you out, I certainly want to. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you have got a question for me, you know the drill. Go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and send it in, because I am all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith, and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.